I want to take just a moment to thank Josh Baver. He's taught for me a couple of times through Ecclesiastes when I had to call him at the last minute. And what you don't know is that Josh has been under pressure all this period of time because I've asked him, said, Josh, sometimes it happens on Saturday night, sometimes on Sunday morning, and I can hardly move. And could you get a lesson ready so that I can just give you a call and you'll get up and be able to present it? That's one of the hardest things in the world to do because you get your lesson ready, then I go ahead and teach. Then you get your lesson ready and I go ahead and teach. And then maybe the next week, he's didn't review it and I call him and I'll give it a try. In other words, what I'm saying is I realize it is a very difficult position that I put him in. And so that's the reason I want to take this moment to thank Josh. And Josh, as a reward of this, after Jordan's lessons, which you'll start 2 weeks from today, we'll start with the men of the congregation giving morning lessons, and we're going to honor you by having you to give the first one, okay? Okay. We'll get moving on as fast as we can today. As you well know, what we're going to be talking about today is just answering questions about some of the things that you have in mind about what it is like to growing old. Now, I want to forewarn you that I'm not going to tell you how to grow old because I don't know how to do that yet. Haven't got that mastered, but I can tell you what it feels like when you do. And so that really is what we're going to be talking about in this. Now, when I was a boy, the average age span was somewhere in the 40s. That's shocking in America. And I remember that my dad and his cohorts would talk a great deal about, do you think you'll make it till you're 65 so you can retire? And they would sit around and talk about that. And they would say, boy, I hope I can. I'd just like to spend a year or two in retirement. And they had to retire. They did retire at 65. And that was one of the greatest things of their life, was to think about just being able to live until 65. And not too many people lived that age or lived over 2 or 3 years after that age. Most of the people that I know back in those days were dead by the age of 70. Well, today all that has changed. Today the average age is 78. If you say, how long does a baby expect to live if they're born today? Here in America, it's 78 years. That's the normal, that's the average age. Now, once you get up there in the age, then it keeps crawling on up. And so this is a blessing, I guess, and it's a curse, as you see in the economics, because of the Social Security and all of this that we have there. But when you stop to think about it, when you're talking about age, I have a much better chance of living to be 90 than anybody in this audience. A much better chance of living to be 90. Now, I don't expect to be here much more than, at the very longest, maybe 3 years. But the chances are, and Uncle Sam tells me in his actuary tables, you probably live to be 89. That's what they say. And so on you go with this as you look at it. But this is just part of age. It's part of growing old and coming to the end of your life. Now, we have to get on with this because we've got 15 questions today. And that means if I spend 2 minutes on each question, we will still just barely run out of time. So I'm not going to be able to take a long period of time on any question. However, every one of them, you understand, we could talk about for, I suppose, hours on them. Now, the first question is, how do you balance God, family, and life's hustles and bustles in a realistic way? That's one of the big problems today. One of the great problems that I didn't have, my parents didn't have when I was growing up, but it's something that all parents have today. And so parents today have all this hustle and bustle with their kids going back and forth and doing this and football practice, basketball practice, soccer, gymnastics, and so on you go, and dropping off the kids here and there. And it is a hustle and bustle world that we're in. So it's a world that you have to work on, and it's a very, very important world. Now, let me tell you very quickly what I would suggest that you do. And I suggest that you do it this afternoon. And that is to sit down and stop to think that you're really not that important. Now, every one of us need to stop and think every once in a while, I just got to go here and here and here and here, and I got to go help this person, I got to do this, and get them. What would the world do without me? Well, you're not that important. So sit down and think, the world has gotten along this long without it, and maybe I can rearrange so that I can see really how important I am. And sit down and budget your time, just like you would sit down and budget your money. If every week you run out of money and you are going crazy because you're constantly overspending and running out of money, what would be the sensible thing to do? You'd sit down and cut it out. And you'd say, we're not going to buy this, and we're not going to buy this. But what about the kids? They want this and they want that. No, we're not going to buy it. And you have to budget your money. Now, the same thing is true with your time. Sit down and budget your time. You may have to cut out all those games. You may have to tell your kids, look, kid, pick one sport that you want to play. Pick one. And then I'll take you and you can play that sport or whatever it is. And so sit down and budget. And make sure that in all cases, God comes first. Make sure that you take care of your family. That unless you take care of your family, God says you're worse than an infidel. And then put everything else in perspective. And everything else is not very important. Okay, number 2. How do you cope with the aging process and the physical limitations that increase and the realization that you just cannot do what you used to be able to do in your youth? This is the worst thing that happens to you when you grow old, is that you come up and all of a sudden you begin to realize, I can't go any farther. I just can't go. I remember 6 years ago, I guess it was, I was over helping Dan and we were painting a house. And my back was hurting so bad that finally I went out, got in the yard, laid down, and finally I just said, Dan, I can't go any farther. I have to go home. And so I left him, never went back, and went home. That's when he said, Dad, a leave. And he talked to me, and I've been taking a leave ever since that day. But you've got to, you've come to a point where you just can't do it. And it gets worse and worse and worse, and it's humiliating because little jobs that you used to do, like the sink gets clogged up, and okay, now here we got this. Now, it's 5 minutes. I'm going to wait a little while because I just can't do it right now. And so you leave it, and you go sit down. And the problem is, it never comes back to where you say, okay, I'm really ready to go. Now that is humiliating. That's one of the most humiliating things in the world for a man to go through. And for me to have to call on somebody, could you come over and do this, when it takes them maybe 5 minutes, when it's just a small job, and and ask them to come and do that job for me because I just don't feel like doing it. Humiliating. Worst thing that's going to happen to you as you grow old. Now here's a good thing. I finally come to enjoy it. And so you'll come around and you'll say, okay, let's just face it, I can't do it. I can't do it. It's just like this morning. Helen's got a box out there, some things that she wanted to bring to services to give to somebody. And so she said, do you want to take that box? I looked at it. It probably weighs 7 pounds. And I said, no, not this morning. We'll take it tonight. And so if you want to, you can check and see whether we bring the box tonight. And if we don't, we'll do it tomorrow. But it really hits you, and it's the most humiliating thing that you're going to have to go through. 3, what do you wish you had learned a long time ago, if anything, if you could do it all over again? Well, the answer to that may surprise you, but it is nothing. And you say, what do you wish you had learned a long time ago? We hear people say, boy, I wish I could live life again and know what I know now. I don't. I don't, because you'd be all out of the system. You go back, and if I knew what I know now, I would never have done this or that or this, and I would have looked and seen all the dangers in all of these things, and I would have never done anything. And I can't even imagine what my life would be like had I known then what I know now. And you say, well, boy, you could have done this and that, and just look at all the money you could have made and deals that you passed up or bad deals you went into. Yeah, I realize all of that, but I realize it's those things that gives you the education and makes you who you are. And remember, the book of Ecclesiastes says that you live according to your heart. You live according to the age that you're in. Let's suppose that you could take a little baby and you had the power some way or another to say, you know, from age 1 to age 10, these little kids get knocked around a lot. They run around, they fall, they run into walls, they do this, they do that. And so what I'm going to do is, I have this pill. I'm going to give that little 1-year-old baby a pill, and it will know what a 10-year-old knows. Would you give that baby a pill? Okay. So stop to think about it in that way. And so here's this 1-year-old baby, knows what a 10-year-old child knows, and you're going to expect that child to live in this life. And so when you say, boy, I wish I could do it all over again and know then what I know now, well, I'm just the opposite. No. God's way is the way that He has described, that you go through these things, you learn these things while you're young, and we never can get away from that. 4, you've made many ups and downs, you have had many ups and downs in life, yet you remain faithful in your entire life, while many of the others over the years have not done so. In a few words, how would you describe or summarize your self-talk that carried you through? I had 2 people to ask this question. Old people tend to do dumb things. And I've noticed as I study history and I've watched others that go on before me, that especially old preachers are dumb. And as they get down to the end of life, they do some real dumb things. And sometimes these guys, especially preachers I'm talking about, they do a great job all their life and they preach the gospel, and then they get up about 80 years old, and then for some reason or another, they think up a new doctrine, or they quit this or they quit that, and they do some dumb thing, and it ruins their reputation then for the eternity, I guess. So what do you do? Well, the answer to that is, I don't know. Now, my self-talk really is this, and that is that the older you get, the less you know. Now, that is literally true. Now, I understand if you want to know the facts, after you've lived 80 years, you know more facts and so forth than somebody who has lived 30 years. I understand that. But with all of those facts and all those situations in life, you've seen so many that all of a sudden you realize what Solomon's talking about when he says that man will never figure it out. So what should you do? What do you do here? What do you do there? And so you can make some intelligent decisions, but the point is, the older you get, the more you realize, the less you know. And the more you realize, the less you know, then you just can come to a certain point of where you say, I don't know. Now, here's one thing as you say, what's your self-talk? My self-talk in all of this is, God is in his heavens. God is right. The Bible is true. Whatever else comes, set it aside. If somebody brings to me an argument today to show me that evolution is true, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to set it aside. I know it is not. And you say, well, Lowell, can you answer it? No, I can't answer it. I don't understand. But no, it is not. There is a God in heaven. The Bible is true. And just write that down on your heart. Make it as firm as you possibly can. Whatever happens, don't ever blame God. Whatever problems come in your life, don't ever say, why is God doing this to me? Just take it and say, I don't understand it, but I know that it is the best, and I'm going to stay faithful to God. Now, the older you get, probably the more you have to give that self-talk. So start now, and don't deviate from that. 5. When it comes time to die, some of us just pleasantly die in our sleep. No decisions are required. Others, like Linda, are given a choice. You can either fight it for a long time with chemo and so forth. And so the question is, what do you do if that time comes in your life? My answer is, I don't know, because I haven't experienced that. I don't know. I have experienced times when I would want God to take my life. And I have talked to him. I don't know why that's emotional. I had no idea. But to ask him to take me home, because you hurt so badly at certain times, and there seems to be no end in sight. And so if you could end your life, you would really want to go ahead and do it. So I can see where that time would come. Now, God has built in us self-preservation. So don't ever get the idea that you can say, oh, I'm ready to go. I'll go today. All these songs that you hear about, I can't wait to get to the other side and all of this, those are, we're saying something that's not true. How many of you right now would want to die today if you had the choice, see? And you'd say, no, I wouldn't want to do that. Well, don't you want to go to the other side? Then you say, I just can't wait to get there. Yeah, you can wait. You see, I'm not making fun of you. I'm telling you that's God's plan. Now, God built within a human being to do everything you can possibly do to preserve your life. And if you didn't have that self-preservation built in you, all of us would die before we're 10 years old. So it's God's will. It's God's way of self-preservation, of trying to stay alive as long as we possibly can. But then there comes a time with man when those evil days come, when you say, I have no pleasure in them. And when those pleasures get so that they're pains and more pains and more pains, that will help us to make that decision. What I'm saying is, I don't know that answer, but I'm pretty sure that when we get to that particular point, we'll kind of be like Linda. The answer will be really simple, really simple. First of all, she says, I'm not going to take chemo. Then she says, no, I'm going to take chemo. So then she tried. And finally, life got so miserable, she cut it off and said, I'm not going to do it. Those decisions will come, I think, as we feel something that none of us have felt now. What do you do when you get old like me and start to think about the what ifs a lot? You know, what would it be like if I'd only done this or that? Now, this is a question that you're going to go through. What if I had have bought this piece of property? What if I had not done that? What if I... And so you start looking at all of these things, and you can whip yourself to death in it. So now, I would suggest one of two things. Either make sure you never make a mistake in life, so you don't have to look back and say, what if I had? Or, like all of us, we've made these mistakes. Sometimes I try to think of some good thing I've done that you could give me credit for, and I can't think of any. They're accidental. And you say, well, okay, what if I had done this? Then I would have been a rich man. Or then the best thing to do is to stop and think. If you'd have done that, you think you might have been a rich man. How many people here, when they're 30 years old or 25, if you could become rich, if you had that knowledge and you could make a decision, you could see it, and if you had that financial knowledge, you could do this. But how many people here, if all of a sudden you were given $1 million, $2 million today, 30 years old, how many would stay faithful? Now you might say I would, but I'd say the chances are out of 100 people, maybe one. I doubt that. And you got to look at it and you say, okay, if I'd have done that, this would have happened, but what else would have happened? And look on the positive side. Always look on the positive. Don't ever look on the negative. And don't ever say, I would have bought this piece of property, I would have become rich, and then I would be happy and I would have done all this good. That's a bunch of nonsense. That's not true. If I'd have done that and this had happened, I'd probably fallen away from the Lord. Or I'd have done this or that. So take these, I did things, and turn them all around. Do problems that people have and come to you for advice ever drive you crazy? Do people wear you out? This is a question that if I answer it, it might leave the wrong impression. But yeah, there's a time in your life of when it does. And this is what God means when he says, do not grow weary of well-doing. Helen and I have both seen the time about 10 years ago when we were so weary of talking to people about their problems that it was just, we were in burnout mode. And she would not answer the phone. I just don't feel like talking. I can't talk again. And we came to that, and we're not the only ones. This is just, you hear burnout, you have it in your job, so it's nothing different. But you do have burnout, and yeah, it can happen. But God again says, do not be weary in well-doing. So go ahead and work through it. And I might say now, I don't want you to feel bad in case you want to ask me anything, because that's not the case now. Nobody's asked me anything for so long that I don't even know how to answer it. Verse 8, what does it feel like when you start outliving all your friends and contemporaries? It feels good. It means they're gone and I'm not. Again, I don't know how to answer that. It's just part of life. And yeah, you miss them. And they've been part of your life for 50 years. And what do you do? And they're on your mind a lot and all of this. But it's just part of life. So it's no big deal. Do you think the future is better or worse than your generation with its world wars and all of this? It's both. I've lived through some very bad times, but there are very bad times coming for this country. And I preached a series of sermons some time ago, and my prediction, which means nothing, was by about the year 225, you're going to see big problems in the church and big problems in the nation. And we see them coming around, and we see them all the time popping up, and this Muslim problem and problems we've never dreamed about before. I just can't imagine that's there. And so if I could trade, either live through what I've been through or what you're going through, I'd take what I've been through, because I pray for you, and I'm afraid the tough times are ahead. Do you ask God to take your life because you're tired? I think I answered that. The answer to that is yes and no. You can't imagine how much you think about death. I think about death as much as you think about your job or your vacations or whatever you're doing. It's on my mind almost all day long because it's a big thing. It's a big thing in my life. And it's something that will be the most exciting, exhilarating, pleasant thing that I've ever experienced. And yet you have that self-preservation. And you have other things that hold you back. And when I think about going, I would like to go today, and then I think about leaving Helen here. Can you imagine what you guys would have to go through if we turned her loose on you for the next 20 years? You want to take care of your loved ones. But, Lord, take me as soon as it's within your plans. What is the worst, most shocking thing that's happened in your lifetime? Without doubt, the death of my wife. We'll not even get started on that. There's no way to explain what you go through when a spouse or a child dies. It is totally unexplainable. 13. The one thing that strikes me as I get older is that I'm more conscious about my age, and it goes on that I want to make sure that my life is right. Well, that's good. As you look around and you see it, that's part of maturity. Maturity is that you slowly grow in to being a child when you have no concern, no care about life eternal. Until finally you go through life, you see what's here, you grow old, your aches and pains come, and then about the only thing that you really think about is going to heaven, is dying. Remember, we talked about Ecclesiastes says, desire shall fail you. You have no desires to go on vacation. My kids have said, Dan, why don't you go on a cruise with us? I don't have any more desire to go on a cruise and enjoy all of that luxury and everything their pictures show us than I have of going out here and sitting down in the snow. It's just, there's nothing there. And you say, why? I don't know. I guess I see it on TV. I have no idea. But your desires fail you. And so you go from one end to the other. You go from where you don't care one thing about eternity and to where that really is all that's on your mind. Does dying scare you at all? This is a real interesting question. The answer to that is yes and no again. Because suppose that the president were to call you or me today and say, I want you to come to the White House and dine with me. I want to ask you a few questions. And so they're going to send you a ticket, and you're going to the White House. Now, here's a real honor. And you're going to have an experience that you can covet for life. It's going to be a thrill. You're going to go buy yourself some new clothes. It's going to be a real thrill. But there's a fear. There's a fear. Will I say something wrong? Will I act the way I should? Wonder what I'll do to make a fool of myself. What about this? What about that? There's always there's always fear. And really, when you get down to it, in the things that you really enjoy, there's always a fear attached to it. That's the reason people go to these horror houses. They go there because they want to get a thrill, but you couldn't get the thrill if there wasn't a fear attached to it. Now, I often think, when the angels come, what will I do? Will I say some dumb thing? Will I act the way I should? When I get there, what will I do then? Will I make a fool of myself? And so you have those feelings that are there. And so the answer is yes and no. No, dying is the most thrilling thing I can think of in my life. And yet dying is a fearful thing because it's going to be a whole new experience. And I hope I don't make a fool up there like I have down here. the 15th one. Looking back over your life, what now do you realize was not as important as you thought it was? Now, I know that really all of Ecclesiastes was about that, but from your perspective, in other words, setting aside the book of Ecclesiastes, let's suppose we hadn't studied that. What's the most important thing I've learned in life? Now, you're not going to like this. You're going to think I'm trying to be cute. And you're going to think, oh, he didn't answer that very well. But I'm going to give you the perfect answer. An answer that I'm sure is the only one really that really fits. Now, I'm going to give it to you, not based on what Ecclesiastes says, but I'm going to give it to you from my own experience, what I've learned. And here's what I've learned about life. I've learned that vanity of vanity, all is vanity. That's what life's about. Whatever you've got, whatever it is, naked you came, naked you'll go. Whatever you do, however rich you are, however popular or beautiful or powerful, whatever it is, it's all vain. It's just a period of time to prepare you for what life is all about. And so to summarize it, I can tell you from life's experience, from having experienced the ups and downs, having experienced poverty and having experienced riches, having experienced various things, having experienced death of loved ones, and having experienced great, beautiful times upon this earth, that in reality, there's only one thing that really makes any difference. And don't ever forget it. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is a whole duty of man. Thank you for listening.